Welcome, real estate rock and rollers, to Real Estate Rockstars RocknRolla Online. This is where we move you into the space of momentum. Obviously, each product that we have inside of Sales Trainer, Property Careers, Corporate Manager, and of course, Real Estate Rockstar all dovetail in, and certainly around the prospecting equation, if nothing else. If we measure that as the progress of what you do in and around real estate, pretty much we move from foothold, which is centric to Property Careers Prospector School. We then move into Sales Trainer Mentor, which is centric to traction and building your market share, and of course, developing your skills in and around the listing presentation. Because as we say, every problem that occurs inside of a real estate transaction emanates from this. And now we move into momentum, which is founded around Real Estate Rockstar and the need to become a real estate rock and roller. Today's session, number 7, we want to talk about double figure listings. For many, this is an aspiration, but ends up being somewhat of a pipe dream because we pay lip service to it, but rarely do something about it in the context of making it a reality. So, double figure listing starts with the understanding of just what momentum is. And the reason I'm giving credence to those first 3 stages, notwithstanding in Prospector 4, we're moving into the space of automation, which is fundamentally controlled at the sales team leadership level. And of course, the beneficiaries of that are everyone at every level: sales associates at the prospector school level, sales professionals at the sales trainer mentor level, real estate rock stars, of course, at the rock and roller level. And it starts, as I say, with understanding what momentum is. Well, if we used an analogy, foothold at the sales associate level is breaking into a market or reinvigorating a market. Now, you might even be in here, which some people are, at the rock and roller level, yet you still have to start that spark, get those seed listings inside that marketplace, or relift the presence in that market to be a real chance of, developing it. Or you might even be already got one area going and now you're moving to a new area and you are coveting the idea of breaking and becoming a player in that new market zone. And got to say, it gets easier as you go because you start to understand exactly what has to be done and how you put that into action. But if you're not at the stage where you're commanding at least double figure listings, and let's face it, if you're a player in a particular market, if you had an area of somewhere between 3 to as many as 5,000 properties, well, the capacity on that alone, certainly when you get up to 5,000, is basically 100 sales. 100 sales almost readily translates to somewhere around 120 listings, giving that, you're going to have close enough to 80 to maybe as high as 90% list to sell ratio. And that means double figure listings. So if you want to command and be a true player, reach that capacity level across an area of 5,000 properties, and be a player, as I said, and get to the 100 sales mark, which I've got to tell you is incredibly lucrative. It is, I don't even have to spell the prosperous disposition that you're going to be in at that stage. I do think I need to give credence to the fact that it's not about work, because if we go all the way back to the beginning, foothold is about getting that spark. It is labor intensive, metaphorically speaking. It's about starting a fire. So there's a lot of work in getting that initial spark to graft and become a flame. Metaphorically, again, if you move into traction, once you've got that fire started, there is still not as much work as we see in foothold, but there is still some work. Yes, you've got a voice in the marketplace. Yes, it is rewarding because you now have listings that are converting across to sales, and your focus is leveraging off one listing, turning that into two, and two into four, and so on. Now, for many of you, you might still be in that stage, albeit that you're feeling quite advanced in understanding how the whole thing works, but you're not just getting into that momentum level. So again, as I say, that's about building the fire, you know, still a bit of labor intensive, is not as much work as it is in foothold. When you move into momentum, you actually have that market share. You are now indeed a player inside that marketplace, enjoying somewhere between, you know, 25 to as high as 35% market share. That is fluctuating somewhat. There's a lot of language that I've given around not necessarily wanting to be a standout first market leader, rather being a silent second. I think silent second is way more lucrative. You don't have to chest beat to be prosperous. You already are. It's lucrative in the fact that, you know, you are a number two player. You're not noticeable, so nobody's trying to chop your legs out. And I think it becomes a nice little career lifestyle. And I urge anyone that's a rock and roller to consider that's what you should be coveting, and that's what you should be working around doing it. But how do we get into this state? How do we actually move from having built market share, or even still building market share? How do we get it to a point where we now know that we can just allow the plane to plateau out, maintain that market share? So you might be across 2,000 or 3,000 properties now, and you just want to get that area in order before you maybe take on another market and build it up. And with everything you've learned, that should come a lot sooner than you think. So I say double figure listings is more about a state of belief and a state of mind. It's not somewhere that you need to aspire to. You need to get your mindset, if you like, to accept that it is entirely normal to be working this out. So I look at it like this. I think that maximum wise, we should be looking, even if we talk about the days that we're working, yes, there needs, as we talked about, emancipating activity, a focus on you as the real estate rock and roller, as you as the peak performance professional, focusing on the activities that are keeping the results running over. And that, of course, is you focusing, as we said, on those tasks that you love. And that, of course, is listing presentations. So the whole idea, I say, is that you've got to have that nice little balance between work and play. That is created by just constructing each of your months around, this doesn't have to be hard and fast, but at least contextually saying that I'll work probably 20 days per month. Now, that's only 2/3 of the month. And if you add on the in-between days, that can be, 20 days on, sort of 12, and in some cases, 20 days on, 10 days off, definitely, sometimes 11. And that's a pretty enviable position to be in. And even on the days that you are in, you only need to be in and on around the tasks that have been prioritized and that you know that you need to intervene and you need to control. So we need prospect flow. We need to ensure that we've got opportunities coming our way and that we've got conversions going in place. So to me, to begin with, I make this rather simple. So I say that my month comprises of 28 days. That's it. On each of those 28 days, I'll have 2 days off minimum. So that leaves me 5 days. So the 28 fits into a nice, neat 4 weeks. Then take the 2 days off. I decide what they're going to be pretty much straight away. I don't care if they're consecutive. I mean, for me, it was always ideally 1 weekend day off, usually the Sunday. Saturday was game day. I like to be there. I just prefer to do it. And then just maybe a day midweek. So now I'm down to 5 days, and my only maxim, the one that I stick to personally, that is enveloped into every facet of planning, is that I have to do a listing presentation. Now I'll pause there. I don't delude myself by engaging in market appraisals masquerading as listing presentations. I will have vetted any client that I go out to see out myself, and I will know that they are indeed serious about making a move, and I'm going to do a presentation where if I don't win that listing, someone else is going to do it. So very simply, if I look at, say, knowing for a fact that I'm going to be doing 20 listing presentations per month, and my conversion ratio can afford to be as low as half, and I'm still into double figure listings. Now, again, for a lot of you, that might seem, oh, that's a bit heavy. Not really, because any great activity is the result of premeditated activity and processes that have to be adhered to render that to be plausible. So that's my first maxim, that I do a listing presentation every day. Now, the caveat that I then put on that is rather simple. I say to myself that I have to have the listing presentation appointed and booked the day before. So, you know, it can be, if I would not leave the office without knowing that the next day that I'm coming in, I already have a listing presentation booked. Now that I have that listing presentation booked, and that becomes a maximum, before you panic about that, you just need to look at how you create prospect flow that feeds that. You know, it was only today that I was talking to someone at the sales professional level, and we were talking about listings that they have that have now been moved into welcome homes that are occurring. And I started to ask some questions around these, because fundamentally, when I looked at the welcome homes, with one particular property, we were in our third week. There had been, in the first week, 14 couples turn up to the open for inspection, the welcome home. In the second week, there had been 4, and in the third week, there had been 7. So that's basically 11 and 14 is 25 had been through. Now, I know the ratio is 7 to 1. So I started asking questions about how many listing presentations have emanated from this. And we got not even one, you know, one maybe. And what I had to say to that sales professional, and I would say be a lot firmer than this with a real estate rock star, is that those sellers are there. It's just what you're doing or saying that is preventing them from coming on board. So as I started to ask questions, first of all, commencing with the welcome home invitation, and I'll get to the regenerative in a second, but just specifically with the welcome home itself, I said, what are your thought processes around an open for inspection? And they said, what do you mean? When you bring a property to the open for inspection, what is your centric focus on what that welcome home, that open home, is to achieve? And basically what I got back from the sales person was that, well, you know, we want to move it into a space where we get interested parties through and we get the property sold. And then for me, that was just voila. Now, I'm not saying that I don't want the property to sell as a result of a good open home, but here's the rub. You see, when buyers come to an open for inspection, they're not there to evaluate your structure and your open home per se. They're there to view the property. Now, if they fall for the property, they're going to buy it irrespective of how well your open for inspection was conducted, irrespective of your feedback, your follow-up, no matter what it is, even your negotiation prowess. I've never heard a buyer say, I refuse to purchase that property because of the way the open for inspection was run. However, conversely, I can assure you there are instances where a prospective seller, an active property seller, researching the market ahead of selling, turning up to one of your open for inspections, to compare that property to their own could make judgments about the way you're conducting that open for inspection in a direct correlation to whether or not they're going to utilize your services. So here's the facts. There's always another buyer. So if a buyer's off put, or they don't like the property, or the open for inspection hasn't been run to their liking, there will be another buyer. Even if the market becomes oversupplied, there will be another buyer. However, if a seller comes to the open for inspection, they are more than likely going to be very in the close proximity of that actual property. And if they come and something fails to impress them, where they make the decision that this is not necessarily the agent or agency for them, you will not get a second chance, and you may not even be aware of the fact that you've missed that opportunity. So it is that I say to you, there's always another buyer, but there's rarely, if ever, a second chance with a seller. So this leads me to saying to you, as a real estate rock and roller, your welcome home simply must be centric to the seller. Your welcome home, your attitude toward it must be leverage. How do I identify the sellers that have come to the open for inspection? How do I encourage them to come there? And how do I suitably impress them, so much so that I treat my welcome home as a virtual listing presentation to any seller that's there? You know, there's so much lip service that's paid to this, where I explain to salespeople that once you get past foothold and you're into the extraction stage and you actually have a listing out there in the marketplace, you no longer have to prospect for sellers in chasing them. They're already watching you. In the immediate vicinity, there are active property sellers in a state of gestation, researching the market ahead of their impending listing of the property, and they're watching that property for all that's going to happen around it, and they can make decisions long before you get to the point of making, even if you do end up conducting a successful sale or a successful auction or whatever it might be. If they're if they're put off in the early stages, they can disengage and discount the notion of using you at all moving forward. So again, it becomes important in terms of prospect flow that as a real estate rock and roller in the momentum stage, you are obsessed with the message that's emanate from the first of the big three generators. The second of the first big generators, and that is, of course, is your welcome home. Also, your sales inquiry, this becomes tantamount. If you're collating the information, again, one of the shortcomings I see with salespeople is they put too much emphasis on the currency of sales inquiry. Their focus is what inquiry is relatively new. They do their best to try to convert that for any prospective sellers, and then they just discount it and let it wane. Time and time again, we've proven that, you know, an active property seller needs at least 4 weeks to sometimes as long as 12 weeks to conduct their independent research without the intervention of a salesperson. They're not receptive to any form of listing presentation during this phase, but they are hungry for information as it might relate to their property. So new listings that come on, they want to know where they are and how much they're asking. Any sales that occur in real time, they want to know what the result is in and around that. You know, they might want comparative market analysis. They might want to be aware of off-market listings that are actually being offered to the market, but not necessarily being made public. So if you can get this information, if you can make it accessible, if you can identify those people, and then you can suitably impress them and go back. So if you've got a sales associate working with you, first of all, you have to have the data. You have to have been collating it over a number of weeks, but I would be directing them back to the inquiry that's a minimum of 4 weeks old to that ideal window of around 12. And, you know, again, because I think that sales inquiry data that's older than 12 weeks, your ratio is going to drop again because that window has passed, and they're more than likely many of them have listed with someone or have sold. But again, if you're focusing in that 4 to 12-week mark with data, if it's that old, you can rest assured that you're going to be happening across sellers that are totally receptive to any form of listing presentation and making that work. So it is with the sales inquiry. Then we move to the welcome home. And with the welcome home, I like to think that this is a 1, 2, 3, and everything has to be relatively consistent in creating those opportunities. So it is quite simply that the welcome home invitation goes out. It must be an invitation, given that it's going to people that are in the immediate vicinity. Say, if you are researching the market ahead of selling, we'd like you to check out our welcome home. Whilst you are there, don't forget to ask our representative for information on any other pre-release listings and grab your copy of the Property Sellers Research Guide. If we do this, this is then conducive to them feeling comfortable about attending that open for inspection as a property seller, running a comparison on the property. When they do arrive, so long as your step 2, your greeting runs around this premise, where I just say, good afternoon, my name's Mark Dwyer, welcome. Your name, they tell me their name, I just look at them and say, so what are we doing today, folks? Buying or selling? And I'm nodding my head in an affirmative manner, which basically is, again, conducive to them identifying themselves. But then I go one step further and I say, well, the reason that I'm asking is because we have a Property Sellers Research Guide for those people that are researching the market ahead of selling. The hand will go out before they know it. Now, if I've got a pretty quiet open for inspection and that hand goes out, I might start to move in to further qualification. My first question, of course, being, where are you moving from? Followed by, where are you looking to move to? And it's all about the motive and getting an understanding of how that motive works. Of course, if there's other people there, it's okay. I've just simply identified them and I move on. Because the third hit, which comes on a Monday, and again, you're a real estate rock and roller. There's lots of agents trying to call people immediately after the open for inspection on the same day it's run, whether it be a Saturday or a Sunday, and trying to get their feedback on the property. This is just nuts. It makes no sense to me that anyone's doing that. And it's highly unlikely that someone's going to identify themselves as a seller. So for me, the callback should take place on a Monday, ideally, maybe even a Tuesday. And again, that call's fairly simplistic and I'm overseeing it for other people to do it for me. You just have to train them for the dialogue and they will capture those prospects. So the call just goes like this. Hi. Yep. Sorry to bother you. My name's Mark. We met on the weekend at an open for inspection at number 6, Lovedale Drive. Yep. Now, I won't ask you about this one because I'm sure you would have let us know on the weekend if you were interested in it. But my understanding is you were selling, weren't you? The assumptive close, which they then have to go, no, what gave you that idea? Or yes, that's right, whatever it might be. If there's an affirmative yes, I just move straight into. So just remind me where you were coming from, where you're moving to, make all the conversations centric to the motive. You see, this 1, 2, 3 hit is very consistent with the identification of a seller, then focusing on motive, which we then can move to then presenting our product in a value-added light, giving them the information they need, giving advice rather than price. When they do hit that phase, the presentation phase, they'll be totally receptive and they will most likely have you at the top of the heap to go and do those listing presentations. Now, if you got this chain working, it means that, you know, if we know that in the first month of open for inspections, we're going to have somewhere between 10 to 20 people turn up, well, the numbers don't lie. You've already got your leverage there to make it work. And as you reach momentum, you reach market saturation, you're definitely going to be able to maintain that market share in the way that it works. Now, there's other things that we'll talk about, and there's opportunity for you to pre-sell so you make the listing presentation even easier. But at the moment, we're talking about double-figure listings. So if you've got this process working well, your focus is centric. You are totally absorbed with the idea of making sure that you have a listing presentation on every day that you turn up. and that listing presentation is set the day before, this then provides the opportunity for you to set it up properly. So there's a call that we can talk about where you can, number one, further qualify where they're at and whether they're likely to come on and list, should you go down there to do the presentation. You also have the opportunity to validate your product, to contrast your point of difference before you get there, to run the pre-sell. This is the good thing about making sure that the presentations are at least a couple of days ahead and booked in advance. It allows you to be more psyched and understand and to gather some of the intelligence that you might need to get those, so that when you're out there, you're addressing the actual issue that heightens your chances of winning the business and getting it on board. Now, the final thing is in making sure that you've got prospect flow is the regenerative prospecting process. And I say that you need to actually have this in play as well. And it's just simple steps. Understand that prospecting is largely procedural. It is about building a systematic process that affords you every conceivable opportunity of leveraging into those opportunities. So when you list a property, again, as a reminder, move straight to LA Woman, which is the just listed, which does not have the street number. It has the street name. It does not have a photograph of the property. So when that is going out and it says, we've just listed a nearby property on Jones Street and thought you ought to be the first to know. If you're researching the market ahead of selling, would like to know about this or any of our other pre-release listings, give us a call. So then it's irresistible to a seller. They're going to ring up and they say, where is it? What number is it? And how much do they want? So that's tradable information. And you've got to, you can't belittle this. If you miss the window on this constantly, you are missing opportunities to leverage inside of a process. Understand that the strength of any system lies in its inflexibility. You have to have sequence and deadlines. This is what happens before this happens. So if you go ahead and put the just listed out after the signboard's gone up, you have missed an opportunity for another listing. So once we get the LA Woman is what we call our just listed that goes out, the next thing to do is to distribute or to formulate a two-view website. Now, these are becoming more and more prevalent, and real estate rock stars, you need to know that these are something that are, notwithstanding the fact that they are fantastic as a lure to somebody who's in the selection phase. If you can show them that you've got these individual property websites, they don't cost anything, they're gleaned or you're formulating them through Property Marketer, but they're also useful for those off-market listings. I'm not a huge fan of those, but you do have to understand that your competition are going to try and get under your guard and use these. So the two-view is what I refer to as an off-market blocker. If you can show this to any prospective client whilst they're in the selection phase, it will most likely lessen the chances of a competitor getting under your guard and getting in there on the pretense that they can sell the property without taking it to market. There are other blockers that you need to put in place. One of those is, just as a sideline, making sure that they're aware of buyers you currently have on file that you would immediately bring through the property, even if it comes to the point where you have to name these people by surname and identify them. I think that needs to go out in correspondence as well, because it is an off-market blocker. More on that as we progress, but I just wanted to talk about the regenerative today. So you've got that two-view that goes out. Then you have, which we've already spoken about, the welcome home invitation, which invites them as a seller researching the market, and also makes sure that it mentions the fact that they should ask for the property seller's research guide or some similar document. Then, of course, the welcome home itself, which if you set it up as a virtual listing presentation, and if you're clever enough to contrast it so that your open for inspection is a standout against any competitor in the area, this is conducive to prospect flow. This is conducive to you being an automatic consideration. This is consistent to you maintaining that momentum. We will talk a lot about what happens from the sale point, that when the property sells, don't put the sold sticker up. You should engage in all of, especially recommended, recommendations emanating from the owners of that property that you've just sold to surrounding properties before you put the sold sticker up. This, of course, then means that we utilize accolades, which are all of your testimonials, recommendations, words of praise that are emanating from clients, making sure that this information is getting to any prospective, especially any incumbent active property seller ahead of you getting down there. All of these things add up to more prospects than you actually need. And of course, if you're then getting to 20 listing presentations a month, as long as you're listing half of them, you are actually in double figures. But I think you'll find that you'll be listing better numbers than that, where you'll get a minimum of 12 listings and you might end up approaching about 15. Especially if you're getting 8 and 10, that's a number of 16. I have been there. Was I able to stay there? Not necessarily, because sometimes you meet with clients, you could have them, you just don't feel that they meet your criteria. And I'd rather have the listings that I do want with the clients that I do want. I hope this has made a lot of sense to you. I really want you to get your mindset in order around this. I may bring this subject up again, but it all starts with creating prospect flow that gets you into those 20 listing presentations per month. At the moment, it might seem like a pipe dream. Don't allow yourself to think like that. Understand that it all starts with creating a process, and you let the process drive the results. You turn up. If you're saying and doing the right things, you can have any listing you want. My name's Mark Dwyer. You can reach me at Mark with a K at realestaterockstar.com.au, or you can telephone me on +61 410 592 165. Thank you very much for joining us, and I look forward to talking to you on the next session, I should say, of Real Estate RocknRolla, where we together will rock real estate forever.